Well, we're not ready.
Yeah, well, you're not going to convene because you're not taking any, but yeah, I think that would be great. I mean, so we don't have a specific format in mind. This Angus Jennings, I'm the town manager. Jim Blatchford and I gave a talk on Thursday to the Council on Aging on the meeting. And for that, we had put together just kind of a 2-pager with just listing each article and the recommendations from both the select board and the finance committee. And so I can put that up on a share screen. That's something we could use just to talk through. And if there's questions on articles, and then I have the FinCom booklet and the draft motions that we can talk about as we get into each one. So, oh, good. Okay, great. So, I thought we'd kind of not go through every single article unless there's questions on them, but kind of have an open forum for people to ask questions. And I know not everyone can stay the whole time. So if people have time pressures and want to jump to an article, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm more interested in the questions really.
Yeah, I think if anyone would like any of the articles presented as just a background and then ask questions, or just jump to questions if people already know what their questions are.
So there's a question. Does anybody have specific? Sir, yeah,
Article 25.
okay. And which name?
Mark Dickinson.
Oh, Mark.
Favorite.
Hello. I guess last time I saw you was on a Zoom call.
Yes, it was. And Angus was there too.
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
In person.
Yeah, and Rick, I had also just a question as well.
Okay.
And my question was that.
And actually, if I could, so the mics are here. So if you just for the people who are Zoom, no, if you could speak, but just maybe walk a little closer to the mic, either the one next to Rick or this one here on the table.
Just on Article 25, I guess a question. How many towns in Massachusetts have adopted and that bylaw? Just a question.
Yeah, the majority, it's pretty commonplace. I mean, should we share that?
Yes.
The Conservation Commission has decided to move no action on the bylaw for this town meeting, and I have a statement from the chair. The commission wants to prepare and circulate draft regulations, which it believes will address some of the concerns that have been expressed regarding the proposed bylaw, and they intend to seek additional support from town residents. So the regulations they will draft on their own. It doesn't need town approval. So they felt like it would be better to have that all prepared so people will know what's coming with the regulations before they vote on the bylaw.
So I understand that is not going to be discussed at the town meeting on Saturday.
They're going to vote. Move no action.
Right. And so I have another question. The way this was done at the town meeting, supposed to be a yay or nay over there with a show of hands. I've spoken with several people, so it'll be interesting to see just how the support or lack thereof is on this. This should go on to a vote and not a wave of hands. It should go on a ballot vote. And so how do we get it to go on a ballot vote? Because this is a power grab and it's a land grab. And I've been in this town, I would argue, longer than all of you folks. And I've been in the real estate business for 40 years here. And it is going to dramatically impact the value of people because they are taking twice their jurisdiction. And the other thing that really gets me about this is that the appellate process. So they're circumventing going to DEP and making somebody go to Superior Court. Whose idea was that? And the other thing, I have other questions. We have 3 selectmen. 2 have opposed this. I want to know the person who's for it.
I voted for it.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Are there other specific questions about the bylaw, the proposed bylaw?
I don't think it's appropriate to ask the questions now because conservation is going to provide additional information to supposedly garner support for this.
No, they're going to vote. I move no action, so there'll be no discussion at town meeting.
But you said that they were going to provide additional information
For the next town meeting, so
Right.
probably.
So my question.
So the reason I'm asking about additional questions is to kind of help inform us and ultimately the Concom as to
Whose idea was it to take DEP out of the appellate process? I want to know that.
I don't understand that question.
Okay,
Can you
do
just-
you want, how much do you know about this? Because I've been doing it for 40 years.
I was on the conservation commission for 10 years.
Yeah, so if I go before you as conservation and I want to do something and you and I disagree, I can at that point appeal the decision to DEP. Under this new proposed bylaw, you have to go to Superior Court to appeal it. You really think that's right?
I'm not aware that that's the case.
Have you've read that in detail, right?
Yeah, so this is based on the Mass Association of Conservation Commission. They have a template bylaw, and all the towns that have adopted them have used that as a template. So I would look, I'll check and see what
But-
Merrimack says.
Just because 5 people are jumping in the Merrimack River, does that mean the 6th one goes in too?
You asked whose idea was it. I'm just saying that was the origin of that. So
This,
I'll look
this
into
is
that.
bad. This is really bad. And I would bet that the people that are here, is there anybody here in support of it? No.
Just want to get a better understanding. I read it, but some of it, I didn't understand all of it. I didn't understand exactly how it's gonna affect current homeowners.
Yeah, for those who are on Zoom, they wouldn't be able to hear from over there.
So under the current regulation, conservation has a 100-foot jurisdiction of the buffer zone, right?
Correct.
So now they want to double that jurisdiction. And you virtually want to do anything there, and you have to beg for permission. You have to file a notice of intent, you have to go in, request for determination, notice of intent, you have to go through all of these series of processes for 200 feet. Some of these lots aren't 200 feet big. So anything you want to do, and I am very disappointed that you supported this.
It's not 200 feet. I just want to clarify. They didn't change that. It's 200 feet from a riverfront. That's state regulation. So the buffer zone from is still 100 feet as it is for the state and the river. The river is 200 feet. That's a state. There's very little that's different in this bylaw than what the state requires already. So I think that there needs to be some education so that residents understand.
Yes, I thought we were told when we bought our house a few years ago, it was 100 feet from the river. There's a berm that basically marks that.
Mhm.
If it's doubled to 200, that means our front lawn is gone.
Yeah, it's-
I've asked at least a couple of times now and been told, no, your front lawn is fine, you can do whatever you want with your front lawn. Your back is what you can't. So now if it's 200 feet or changed, now I can't do anything. Like,
Yeah, I understand
can't
that.
plant a lilac or I can't do anything in my front yard.
Can't trim them.
Yeah.
Can't maintain them. I mean, this is just.
Maybe we just keep going before conservation and sit in the office and just overload you people with requests. You know, I'd like you to come down and see if I can trim my shrub. Would that really
Paint
be
my
prudent?
house. Can I paint my house?
Right. I have some work I'd like to do down in the house. Why don't you all come down? Do we have staff, and is that really the best use of our resources to do something like this?
I understand that the river, 100 feet is now 200 feet.
It's
But it-
always, excuse me, it's always been 200 feet. That's the state regulation. That's not something that the town is enforcing or suggesting to change. It's always been 200 feet. Typically, 100 feet has more strict regulations than 100 to 200, most of the house lots have said that with the conditions and lower conditions.
Sorry, can I just ask one other question? It's kind of very similar to
Yes,
this
please.
as well. Sorry, Chris, without back on again. But it's just a little, kind of goes back on the education / context. And I think that some of the things that have been keeping me up at night are, it's like I moved in here, I didn't, are you saying that I can't cut my front lawn again? Is that gonna just run into trees? Like, give me a little bit of, if this bylaw got enacted, what it's gonna impact to the property owners. Like most of the houses in West Newbury up on a wetland or river, are they not gonna be allowed to cut that area or trim it, or will it just become overgrown? Like, it's kind of the law of unintended consequences, and obviously that then would impact the property values. I just get a little bit of.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not on the conservation commission anymore, but I was, and so I can tell you that right now, the state regulates 100 feet from any wetlands and 200 feet from any river. And so That doesn't mean you can't do anything yet, but it means you have to file before the Conservation Commission in order to disturb the soil or the vegetation. So. Right.
Yeah, that's the current regulation based on state.
Oh,
So if you're gonna remove a tree within that 100 feet, typically there's no, especially if it's a high hazard tree, that's something that the agent could come out of the commission and say, that's fine. But if you're significantly disturbing the soil such that you're gonna create runoff into the wetland, there would be conditions.
I click here.
Now we want to impose those conditions and basically double.
I'll close this. I'm going to minimize it.
And the appellate process?
I'm not aware of that part, I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, click on.
I did. I am clicking.
Oh, okay.
I am clicking.
Do you try clicking on this picture?
I did.
Okay.
She just went through, she spent 2 hours going through this thing, highlighting all of the bullet points.
Yeah.
There's some information in there that's gray. I question whether it's intentionally gray because it allows latitude for the conservation. We'll just see how much support the town gets for it, because I'll tell you, there's a lot of people that are up in arms about it.
Unfortunately, there's some misinformation, so.
It's 9 pages long, so if somebody reads it and it's clearly written.
I think, there were several iterations of this. It started out, if I recall correctly, Wendy, at the outset, the first version of this, I think extended to 200 feet.
For intermittent streams, which is currently on state regulation.
And then that was rolled back to state regulations.
So can I ask,
Okay.
what's the matter with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
regulations that we have in place right
Get
now?
a better
Is
view.
there
I think
something
that's
wrong?
what's going on.
Yeah, right now, the town has no authority. If somebody is violating an order, a condition in their order of conditions, the town has no recourse.
But is that what we're talking about in the 9 pages?
That's part of it.
Well, no, but if
It's a lot more than that.
something like that were reasonable and that's in their existing order, then that's an enforcement issue.
But the
Right.
town, yes, but the town doesn't have any authority. We would have to rely on the state to.
You can't enforce your own order of conditions.
We have no legal authority to do it. We can't fine, there's no legal action. Is that,
Oh, I thought there was.
Well, let's say if you do have a building permit, you're building, that's what are conditions, you've got to follow those strictly. So we're.
right, with the building
where's breakage?
department. But so the company.
Exit full screen.
No.
I'd like to get full screen.
So the other thing I just want to say is that part of why I support the bylaw is that, if you recall, we had the Coffin Street development not too long ago. And having a strong conservation bylaw could have helped us mitigate some of the impacts of that project. So that is one advantage of having a local
But
bylaw.
this is a very broad sweeping bylaw.
I
that
understand
takes-
those concerns, but I'm saying, conceptually, that's why I support a bylaw. I agree that there's some things that need to be worked out and better communicated to the public. So, your input's really important to help guide that.
Yeah, there were also some parts of this that I think I support. For instance, there was, I guess I'll say tighter definition of vernal pools. There were areas, not depressions in your yard, but, smaller areas could be designated as vernal pools. And, vernal pools are ecologically very important. And the stuff that depends upon vernal pools, as part of the ecosystem that we all depend upon, is losing ground because we're losing vernal pools, because areas are being developed that ecologically are important. So to me, that's important, because it might seem like nothing to one of us right now, but to our kids maybe, or our grandkids, it might be a big deal if certain species don't exist anymore. They might actually be food for other things that, for birds that are important to us.
Rick, I have a problem with the 200 feet. I have a
Okay.
problem with the appellate process. And that's wrong.
Okay.
Why? I couldn't care less about all of these towns and their conservation committees. That's basically a sidestep for a homeowner to be able to appeal. And it creates an enormous and very costly obstacle for that homeowner to have to go through to try to get resolution. That's wrong.
That is wrong. That's my opinion.
And I think many of these people share the same thing. My neighborhood's up in arms about it. River Meadows up in arms about it. We'll see just how much you folks garner support for this.
Sir, please.
Yeah, so I had a question.
Could you identify yourself and your?
Sure, it's Chris Laterio, 25 Rivercrest Drive.
Great, thank you.
Under Article 14 is the relation to the Wetlands Protection Act. I'm no expert on any of this. But it seems like the Wetlands Protection Act should be the statute that this gets passed under because we're trying to protect wetlands. It's being passed under the Home Rule statute, which I think is the way that they go to Superior Court rather than DEP. Okay, and more troubling, I think, is it is the intention that the bylaw and other requirements shall be interpreted and administered as stricter than those under the Wetlands Protection Act and regulations. Why is that? We're protecting wetlands. Why are we doing it under a Home Rule statute? That's a hostile act to everybody in this room who lives near the wetlands. That's very hostile to us. And for you not to understand where we're coming from and why we're angry about this. We moved in 4 years ago, not 40 years ago. Took a lot of pride in buying a place right on the water. And now to see all of this stuff threatened in a way that is completely opposite of what I thought this area was about. This hostility is just, it's really, really sad. Really sad. And you guys really need to listen to that and pay attention to it. And just my question, who came up with that going under the Home Rule rather than the Wetlands Protection?
Well, I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is that the Wetlands Protection Act, that's the state regulation. So for a bylaw means that the local conservation commission will have more strict requirements. So that's the way that you do that. You have to go through the Home Rule in order to have the strict requirements.
If I could, we do have, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were in the middle. There's just someone online who's raised their hand. So I want to, when you're done, turn to her and then, I don't want to forget about the people on Zoom.
I guess what I'm saying is why are we getting stricter than what the state has said is necessary for the protection of wetlands? That's what I'm saying. Why are we doing a run around a statutory scheme that is there to protect all of the Commonwealth, and not just, the banks of West Newbury?
I think the short answer is because that statewide applies to everybody. There's no specific considerations for West Newbury who might have different conditions than Merrimack or Haverhill. So that's the idea behind it. I'm just telling you that's my understanding.
The same river runs through both.
Okay.
So we have a couple of hands raised, but Elisa was first and I think Archie was after Elisa.
So I just want to say, I think these points are really important, but I also think they are totally moot when it comes to this upcoming town meeting. As I think I heard, the Conservation Commission is not going to move this forward. They're going to gather more information, and I think these comments are valuable and ought to be in feedback to the Conservation Commission as they rewrite or rethink or whatever they do. But I don't think it's going to be productive at this particular meeting to discuss this further, even though, as I say, I think these are really valuable comments, because I don't think they're going to raise it at town meeting.
What's that?
This is the plan.
And I have to raise my hand.
Archie had raised his hand as well.
Oh, now I've got to fear.
Hey, so you all set?
Do not let them in. Yay! For our last song, let's do row, row, row your boat. Get out your.
Archie, you want to speak up?
I just wanted to say, to reinforce what Elisa said, that at the moment, this is this is not an issue because the Conservation Commission is not going to bring this forward, but I'd like that everyone pays strict attention to the drafts they will bring this back at future town meetings. And
if you can't do this,
I have to be, I've been sending what I feel are constructive comments to the commission for over a year, and actually 0 of my comments have ever been addressed, and I find them to just be are not unreasonable comments, but very reasonable comments that are simply ignored. So all I want to do is the people that see the reach of this proposed bylaw and how it would be an extremely, they're saying it's not any different, but they changed the definitions of a lot of things to make a lot more households be under their jurisdiction. And I just want people to pay attention and not at the last minute, because they say they will pay attention, but they actually don't. But having said that, I think we can drop it because at the moment it's not happening.
I would like to thank you and Archie for voting against this. I really do, because, and to Archie's point, this is a board, they're an appointed board. And to not respond for 1 year to his suggestions, what does that say? Yep. They're totally turning a deaf ear. This is wrong. And so what do we do about this? They need to be called in front of the selectmen and called out. Why are they not responding? Anyway.
I don't know.
It says that.
Yeah, Archie, I don't want to contradict you, but I think there were a couple of things that they did relax the original 200-foot extension from the intermittent stream. They did change that. So for whatever it's worth, I mean, just for the sake of accuracy.
Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Robin Plasinski, 7 Summer Street Lane. I just have a question. So this is a warrant article. It's warrant article number 25. It said to review document X, you needed to go to town hall, which I did. Told that they were very, very cordial, gave it to me. So now apparently we're not voting on warrant article number 25 at the town meeting on Saturday. How does the process work? Who makes these decisions? And is it the selectmen of the select board that determines what warrant articles get reviewed by our community?
Yeah, this is the select board that ultimately determines what goes on the warrant.
Okay.
With exception, if the planning board has an article, say a zoning related article, I believe they, and Angus, you would know this, but I believe they can put that article on the warrant. That article can go on the warrant regardless of how the select board feels about that particular article. But in most cases, ultimately.
Raise hand. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And it was the Environmental Commission that decided that warrant article number 25.
There, raise hand.
This Saturday.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify perhaps that even though the select board decides what's on the warrant, individual groups propose things they would like to be on the warrant. So in this,
I'm going to cause a big problem here, but I
requested that it be on the warrant.
notice me. Notice me.
But ultimately, it's your call.
We see a Casey just want, yeah. So Casey's raising her hand. I think she wants to address the question that was asked.
I do. Okay. Hello. The motion to take no action is a motion which we will vote on. if the town wishes to discuss this article, we can vote no on the motion to take no action, in which case a positive motion can be made and we can discuss it. So the fact that the Conservation Commission has decided to move no action does not mean that we cannot discuss this at the town meeting.
Thanks for the clarification, Casey. That, I understand, that's correct. And I guess I misspoke there. The intent of the Conservation Commission that originally proposed the article at this point is to move no action and not take it up at this town meeting, and instead to develop, to begin to develop the regulations that would accompany this article that might answer some of the questions, not necessarily the questions that came up tonight, but some of the questions that have come up in other conversations. And then, look at the article again at a subsequent town meeting. So
The discussion at that meeting I attended was to have several listening sessions with the public instead of just the one we had. So to really try to get broad understanding of the concerns.
right. So I guess what I would suggest is, this has been through several public sessions. And I don't know if any of you attended any of those, but they're open to the public. And, going forward, as there are more, if you were to attend those meetings and make your concerns known, there would be a way to get in front of where we are right now.
One would hope that they address our concerns quicker than they address David's. One would hope. Right? A year. From people who are managing the town, because they don't respond.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Paula McDowell, I have a comment / question. When it was determined that it was gonna be no action, was this posted anywhere? I didn't see anything. I think a lot of people lost a lot of sleep over this. There was some stuff on Facebook. I didn't see any comments from conservation or any of the select people that it was a decision to vote no action anywhere.
The vote will be by town meeting.
Or to go-
So the motion will be no action.
Was that?
No, because we're not at town meeting yet. So that's why it hasn't been presented as public information, because
Got it.
but from dialogue with people on the Conservation Commission, the understanding is that their intent is to move no action.
Okay.
So it's
This is a bunch of crap.
something that has actually happened.
Okay. So it's
It's
okay that we've been.
it's more than
I mean.
it's more than speculation,
Yeah,
but it isn't, it's not a fact.
okay. Just to confirm, any changes that are made going forward, there will be votes? Or did you say something at the beginning of this meeting that they can make changes without it being brought to town meeting?
No, what I was referring to is the difference between a bylaw and regulations. The
Okay.
bylaw has to be approved by the town.
Okay.
Meeting. The regulations, the Conservation Commission develops on their own.
Okay,
And so there's no town, vote.
okay.
Sorry.
So any changes would be voted
On the bylaw, not
on the bylaw. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so, and just to elaborate on that, so the bylaw as written would authorize the Concom to approve regulations, and I think that Concom, was aware that there were going to be questions about what are these regulations, what might they cover, and so I think one of the things they discussed last Monday, and I think you were at the meeting, so I shouldn't speak, but is that they, prior to bringing something to a future town meeting, they would like to at least to have draft regulations that are substantially complete, so that they could at least answer questions about what the regulations are. Would be intended to do, similar to what we did with the stormwater bylaw last fall. By the time we brought it to town meeting in the fall, we had regulations that the planning board hadn't yet voted because they weren't authorized to, but they were substantially complete, so that we were able to, people could see the full picture, the bylaw and the regs, not just one.
Just a follow-up question to that, and how will that information be distributed to us? Like, do we have to then make time to go to Concom meetings, Like, how will we know when they're out? Where do we get copies of them?
So that's a really good question. I think in the normal course of things, it's, you keep an eye on the Concom agendas because they post it on their agenda if they're talking about the bylaw. But I think we can do better than that. And, we could definitely set up a page on the town website, maybe on the commission page, and then post updates as we go. I can tell you that, I think the draft that's in the booklet, the FinCom booklet, I think it's draft 7 since January. They've made a number of minor tweaks. One of the things, just speaking frankly, it's been a little frustrating for me in my office is when we get updated drafts, we don't get red lines showing where they changed. So I've had to manually combine them so I can see what the changes are. So I'd like to see the Concom use track changes like everybody else so that you can see the changes. So I think we work with them on how to make that clear so people can see kind of as the process goes forward, how the drafts evolve.
You're gonna vote no
And
action to this?
I'll also say, for the last nearly 6 months, we've been short a full-time position in the clerk's office. We had a new assistant town clerk start yesterday. That's great. One of the key functions of the town clerk's office is the website and helping to proactively get information out there and not just rely on everyone to kind of do their own homework. So, I don't want to make excuses, but we have been down a full-time body for just short of 6 months. So with that position now filled and their responsibility, including website and social media, I think, we can support the conservation department, which just has a single full-time staff or a single part-time staff person. The town clerk's office, can help them proactively get the word out because there's obviously a lot of interest in this topic.
Another thing you could do, if you go on the town website, you can subscribe to
Yes.
Conservation Commission agendas, and now you'll get it in your email.
Yes.
And you can look at it.
And not.
That's, I'm glad you said that, Wendy, because that's really important.
That's probably the best way to, because then, you're being notified whenever there's a meeting and it's very, one click and you put 2 clicks maybe and you get to the agenda.
What's it showing me now?
Yeah, so it's just, this is the town website I've got up on the screen here. You just go subscribe to news, and then you go down to agendas, Concom, you just do that, and it would ask you to enter and you do meeting minutes, and that way you'll automatically get them in your inbox. Great, yeah, so that's gonna be a good way to stay current.
How you can get
Anything that you see on the select board agenda, those complete meeting packets with all the backup are posted to the website on the day of the meeting, on the morning of the meeting. So if you ever see something on this or any other topic on the select board agenda that's of interest, if you log onto the town website, there's a link from the select board page to select board open session meeting packets. And those are full of great information. And that's something we just started doing actually last summer when we hired the new assistant town clerk because we hadn't had the manpower to do it. But we've been doing it. It's great. So that's here. So, and we backfilled going back about a couple of years. So you can pull up any, packet. And if there's something of interest, you just click on the topic and it jumps right to the backup. So it's not that easy to find, but if you know it's there, it's a great resource. And we're trying to do better at helping people see that there's a lot of content. We've got to make it easier to navigate and clear, but that's something we're working on. Hey, Casey, your hand's still up. Is that from before? I'm gonna lower her hand. I think it's been up right along. Usually it puts them to, oh, no, it couldn't. Usually it puts, yeah, I think it puts those to the top of the list.
So were there other questions about other articles or I'm really interested in?
Yeah, Article 25 has dominated the conversation so far. So anything else?
Elisa's got her hand up.
Lisa?
Yeah, I think I sent out an email with my questions, but I'm going to ask them again in the interest of more clarity. So there are several proposals with respect to car post Edwards Memorial, Sailors and Soldiers, whatever you want to call it, building. And what I'm really interested in understanding is, and it worries me a lot because we're making decisions even when we seem like we're not making decisions. You know, if we spend a lot of money on one thing, then we're not spending money on another thing that would maybe a future but very pressing problem. It seems to me, and I would like a little bit more understanding of this. We're looking at what to do with the building, and it seems like it's going to be a few $1,000,000 to fix it up, which is more than what we have, and probably even more than what we thought were the millions of dollars because everything's going up right now. So it looks like the proposal, and I need you to tell me if this is right or wrong and sort of elaborate on this. It looks like the proposal is to scrub the borrowing, rescind that, and then take one of two options. Option one in Article 3 would be to find a way to get rid of it. And the question I have is, do we have anybody in mind? And I know there has been interest by very, very good, talented people, but I don't know that those people have the millions of dollars that would be needed to fix it up, who we could hand it over to with the necessary historical preservation restrictions and also all the zoning stuff and everything else. That seems to be one option. And then the second option would be to tear it down and make it into a park. And my worry is that we're spending not only a lot of money, and my count is it's been over $200,000 in terms of just sort of capital outlay, if you will, not including operational and maintenance cost, and not including all the time this is sucking up in terms of town staff. What do we see, and how quickly can we resolve this? Is this even possible? And particularly, I'm worried about looking for a promising, I don't know if buyer, lessee, whatever we want to call that person. How's that going to work? Are they going to put a bond up that they won't go bust trying to do this? How do you see these options working? And how can we, I don't see any kind of groundswell of solutions coming.
Well, I think, regarding the option of putting a historic preservation restriction on it and making it available, for sale at some nominal value for somebody else to, for an individual or entity to, to restore the building. That there are a number of things that would have to happen for that to work for anything other than a residential application, and most important would be that it would require a zoning change, or at the very least for that particular parcel, and so the process there is not necessarily easy or completely straightforward, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't be done. If somebody approaches the town, if town meeting approves that option, somebody approaches the town, the town, will have to vet that person to make sure.
You can raise your hand.
Well, maybe we'll keep them. We'll have to,
You want to ask a question, you push a
I
button.
don't want to ask.
we'll have to vet that person or entity and review the financial feasibility. And that's a good question, Lisa. I don't think we've, we haven't looked at the detail of that yet, but that's certainly.
Which is what the article is for, is 28,000 to do that due diligence and figure out.
Yeah, I think that was also the historic preservation restriction. That we
Right.
had to put that, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
so,
Um,
and Elisa,
And-
there will be a sunset clause in that, so that if it turns out that it's not gonna be feasible, then we'll move on to something else.
yeah, but sunset clause is 2 years essentially. To the end of FY 24. And we are aware that there is at least one interested party. We don't know of any others, but anybody who is interested at this point probably doesn't want to be overly public about it, because then there might be there might be potential, I'm not sure it's conflict of interest, but they need to stay clear of things until the process is farther along. On the other, the removal of the building and conversion to a park, the sunset clause on that is a year, so we essentially have a year at that point to move forward with that. If that's what town meeting approves.
If I can just supplement what Rick said just briefly. First of all, Lisa, you started your comments with kind of a recap of the 3 articles and a request to verify that your understanding is correct. Your understanding is totally correct. You summarized the 3 very well. The only thing that Rick said that I just wanted to make sure is clear. So, and this is, I'm not trying to split hairs, but Rick said if someone approached the town, obviously, it would be, that would be in the context of a formal procurement process. The town wouldn't just kind of sit and wait for the phone to ring. So that is part of why that article is accompanied by some funding, is to work with both town council on the procurement process, as well as a consultant to draft historic preservation restriction that would be accompanied, that would be binding on whomever acquired the property. So, I think the point that you raised on, that it would be really important within an RFQ process for any respondent to demonstrate financial viability of their proposal is definitely something that would be part of that. As both Rick and Wendy said, that, we're not into all those details yet, but that's definitely something that's kind of par for the course in this type of thing. And we'd work with the legal counsel and the consultant to make sure that, like a performance bond, and that was set properly, because that would be a real concern.
So just to recap, I'm understanding that you do have sunsets, and the outside sunset would be for the find a new occupant option. And that would have an outside 2-year time frame. And is that a 2 fiscal year or a 2 annual year or what? And then I'm sort of wondering, do we have a plan B? Because we've been doing this since 2015, and I just worry about the costs that we're incurring, not only in the outlay of money, but in the opportunity cost of doing other things. We could be doing ash tree preservation or more for the schools, or you name it. So in some ways, I'm thinking not making a decision, even though it seems like it's nothing, in some ways is making a decision. So that's why I'm sort of pressing.
Okay, yeah, well, I mean, obviously, we can't unspend the money that we've already spent. So at this point, what we're trying to do is minimize further expenditure. But in order to make anything happen, there has to be some further expenditure. We can't just, stand back and do nothing because the building won't do anything by itself. That's concerned that we not spend more than we have to, but we have to spend something at this point. And, there was some of the work that was done on the building would have had to be done. I mean, that's not a huge part of it. It's probably only 5 or 10% at the most. There was some abatement work that had to be done on the building. That had to be done no matter what. So that, for instance, there was no way around. And the decision, 5 years ago to try to sort of cap the building so that it didn't degrade further, was the town hedging its bets at that point in time that we would be able to do something more permanent. And we can always look back, hindsight's 20/20, and we can look back and say, well, if we decide to remove the building now, then we'll look back and say, well, gee, we should have done that 5 years ago. Well, we didn't. So, that's hindsight. We're just trying to we've laid out 2 options for the town to decide between. Either of which could work. So, we're dependent upon what the town wants to do with the building, what the town meeting decides to do.
And if I could add that where we got those 2 options from was from the public listening session we had, as well as emails to the select board. These were the 2 options that came out of all that, public input. So it's not like we just decided this is what people, came to us and said that they thought should happen to the building.
So I think the one thing maybe Elisa mentioned that maybe you didn't speak to, Rick. So Elisa, I think you'd asked about the clarification on the 2 years. Is that 2 fiscal or 2 calendar years? The form of motion that the board talked about at its meeting last night was sunset of June 30, 2024 for the disposition. So that's 2 fiscal years. Obviously, that's the motion the board would make. It's up to town meeting. Town meeting could vote something different than that, but that is how the board intends to propose that.
Okay, Archie.
Just to add a couple of other, things were mostly covered, but just in terms of money that's been spent in the past, why did we spend some of this? Some of these were actually safety issues too. There were issues with bricks falling from the building and just being a hazard to anyone even being around. So that's one thing how they were addressed. It had to be addressed. So the other thing I wanted to say is in terms of why did we come up with those particular options? Well, we got new information. The building inspector really delineated what actually could be done with the building if it wasn't if it was a public facility or if it was not a public facility, and really did it very, very specifically and comprehensively this winter. And that had not been done before. People would always come up with, well, what if we put a restaurant in there or whatever, just to say anything. And public meetings, people would come up with a lot of ideas that frankly had been brought up, 6 years ago. But now we had it in black and white that a lot of these ideas were absolutely not feasible, 100% not feasible. Not just we don't think it'll work. We actually have had concrete evidence that these other options with the building would not work. So these two things were some of the things that we thought maybe would work. I think that helps a little too. Sam Joslin's work really helped us define what might work. Okay.
See your hand is up again?
Yeah, I just want to say I don't want to be viewed as being at all critical about either the money spent or the efforts of the town staff and the select board and everybody else to figure out what to do. I feel like this turned out to be an absolutely impossible proposition for a number of reasons that nobody could control, including the zoning, including it was only a 1/4 acre lot that was not suitable for almost anything. And that's nobody's fault. And the fact that the town voted for it is also nobody's fault, because there was a huge, view of the value of the place. But nonetheless, my concern is going forward, how much more time and money do we spend on something that increasingly seems to me to be not a feasible proposition? That's what the message I'm trying to ask, really.
Yeah, okay. And I think I think the select board and the town manager are all very sensitive to that, and but we have to go through a process. We have no option. There isn't an option to walk away from it and pretend it doesn't exist. So we have to do it appropriately, which is what we think are the two options in front of us now. So, I mean, I appreciate the question, but there is, I don't know how else to answer it. We don't want to use any more town resources either, whether it be, staff time or tax dollars. But we can't do nothing. Were there questions about any? I don't know if anybody has any other questions about this particular article. If not, are there questions about any of the other articles? I guess not.
Lisa's hands up.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Lisa.
I have one more question. This is sort of ministerial. Did you figure out if there's a duplicative bylaw about building names, and have you sorted that out?
So we did, and actually, so I haven't had a chance to talk to Casey, so I guess I'll talk to Casey now. Because Casey may or may not think that the approach is kind of procedurally okay, and if Casey does not think it's procedurally okay, my recommendation would be that we pass over the article, because I don't think it's really urgent. It's really a housekeeping article. So this is, Casey, this is Article 30 on the annual town meeting, which is the proposal to adopt the building numbering bylaw, or the building numbering street naming bylaw. And Elisa correctly pointed out that there's an existing town bylaw, Article, what's that, 29, building numbering. And so she raised the concern that, you don't want two bylaws that are addressing the same thing. And so I reached out to the building inspector, and he said, oh, yeah, I'm aware of the bylaw. And he said, oh, the intent was to repeal that bylaw and adopt a new bylaw. So I did draft a motion that would have that effect, and that is in the draft motions the board reviewed last night. But that is not what the article said. So I kind of wish I'd thought to ask Sam that question a month ago before the warrant was signed, and the article itself could have been more specific, but I didn't. And so the article says to adopt a new bylaw, the motion. And so Casey, I'll send you the language. I don't want to put you on the spot right now and ask for an answer, but I'll send you the language of the draft motion. But I'll read it to you. It says, I move that the town vote to amend the West Newbury Town bylaws to repeal Article 29 building numbering in its entirety and to adopt in its place a new section entitled building numbering, street naming, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I think it's not unreasonable to propose that, but you as moderator, you know, obviously you got to put that through your filter. And if that, you know, if you think that's a little out of bounds because it didn't, you know, the voters weren't warned, I would have no objection at all. And like I said, in that case, I would recommend we just pass over it and get it right the next time.
And that's a similar question on Article 31, where the motion is slightly different.
Well, let's when it's done. So first, Elisa, does that answer your question? And then Casey, if you want to jump in, great. And if not, if you want to mull it or I'll send you the detail, that's fine too.
Yeah, I just don't think we ought to have two competing bylaws about the same thing. That's all my concern was. So however you sort it out is fine with me.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so this is a situation that comes under the moderator's responsibility to determine if something that's slightly different from what's in the warrant article falls within what they call the four corners of the intent of the original warrant article. Now, I guess I'm going to have to think about this one because I just heard about this right now. But my initial response is I don't think that this is something that's going to be terribly controversial and is probably an improvement over the existing situation. And it certainly does fall into the four corners of it's about the same thing, about how we number houses, etc. So my initial response would be, it seems like it falls into the four corners of what the warrant article intends. But I will look at it more closely and see if I've missed something about it. But a motion like you suggested, Angus, that would say to rescind the original bylaw and replace it. The only problem I have with that is this a zoning bylaw?
I know it's a general bylaw or town bylaw.
It's not a zoning bylaw. Okay.
It's not.
So it's a simple, okay. So I'll give it some thought and let you know if I've changed my mind about it. Because this is one of these on the spur of the moment I'm thinking about it, but it doesn't seem to me like it's a big departure from what the article says.
Okay, and if you can see the share screen, I did put up the draft. This is the draft motions. This particular motion was not revised when the board reviewed it last night. This is from their meeting packet from last night's meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I would, caution before I go through. So if the draft motions, we got 39 articles. I think there were probably 6 or 7 where the board made some minor adjustments to the draft motions that we at staff level had put together.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't built in the changes. I got to do that and post. Well, I don't know if I'll post. I'll send to you. We wouldn't normally post the motions, but I'll send those to you tomorrow. And then you can go through them in detail. And if you have any concerns, as you know, the board meets prior to town meeting. So
yeah, right. Okay.
Now, there was a similar question that came up last night, not the same, but similar on the very next Article 31. And Wendy had started to raise that just a minute ago. So you see up on the screen that the article as written and the motion. And the problem here, and again, Casey can, once she stews on it, can tell us if it's a problem or how big a problem. But the article expressed the intent to amend the bylaw to designate a permanent member of the Community Preservation Committee, be a member of the West Newbury Open Space Committee. The glitch is that it doesn't specifically say in the article that open space committee member would be in place of the current at-large member. So that was brought to our attention, and we again wrote a motion that I think would cure that if it's procedurally okay. So the draft motion is a little bit different in that it says, for the purpose of requiring that a permanent member of the Community Preservation Committee be a member of the Open Space Committee instead of a member of the community at large. So the motion, I think, is fine. The question is going to be, is it within the stated warrant article? And if it's not, I think probably I'll rather just pass over it than have it be a big parliamentary thing. But I will say, just in your consideration, that I think anybody who's been tracking this initiative over the last 5 to 6 months would be aware that that is in fact a proposal, because it has been talked about at multiple meetings, the Select Board and the Community Preservation Committee. What matters, or not, I don't know, but I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, so I have a question on this one. In the course of all these discussions that you've been having, has there been any negative feedback about this?
It was not a unanimous vote to support it by the Select Board. There have been some concerns raised about whether the replacement of an at-large member with an open space committee member, whether that at-large member is important and that it's, representing someone who's not affiliated with another board, commissioner, committee.
Right.
I think that's a, very, I think there's people on both sides of that issue. But I don't think anything, but I think it's been clear, I know it's been clear right along that was the specific intent.
And it's also, Casey, it's in the red line bylaw in the packet. It's the member at large struck. So.
The one concern that's occurring to me right now is that although the people who are intimately involved with all of these things may understand the difference between an at-large member and replacing it with a fixed member, the people that are voting on this, the town, may not be as aware of the nuances of whether it's an at-large member or a member of another committee. And so it's a question of warning of, do people really understand what they're doing? Because the intent is not clear in the article, as Angus has pointed out. The intent just says that there's going to be a member from the Community Preservation Committee, not that it's going to replace an at-large member. And so it is a question of intent.
Well, if need be, we'll take it up in the next,
I think I would prefer that, actually, in this case, because, remember the discussion we had about the wetlands bylaw? I mean, people are sensitive to who's doing what in terms of representation and control on these committees. And so I'd be more comfortable if you just took it up later. And then worded the article in such a way that it was clear that this was a replacement rather than just a new membership requirement.
Could we just leave the article as is and move them, have the motion be consistent with it? I mean, I think it's really important for the open space committee to be represented on the CPC. I mean,
but then would you have two new members now, the at-large member and the member of the open space committee?
The at-large member has already been a member, but we have a hard time filling that role. That's why we chose that one to replace. It's also not required by state statute for CPC.
Well, but I understand, but if there was a motion made under Article 31, the way it's written, okay, to just say that a member of the community preservation, would the at-large member, even though you're having trouble filling it, would that slot still be available?
no.
Yeah.
Well, because you're not replacing it.
Then we'd be adding a member to the committee.
You're adding a member to the committee. You're not
I
replacing the at-large.
believe that the bylaw that defines the CPC, defines the number of members.
It's 5 to 9.
Oh, it's 5 to 9, okay, I thought it was a certain number, okay.
Well, it's 5 to 9 in the statute,
Right.
but in the bylaw,
Right,
it's
we're revising
7.
that.
Right.
So now you'd have to amend the bylaw to make it 8 if this was an additional member. If I'm understanding what you're saying, Agnes. Right now it says there are 7 members and one's at large.
That's what it says, yes.
Okay, and then so now if you added a member of the Community Preservation Committee, that would make it 8.
Right.
So Article 31 still doesn't address the entirety of the changes you want to make. Because you want to increase the number of, if you're going to keep the at-large member, you want to increase the number of committee members. Now, that's not really what you set out to do. What you set out to do was replace the at-large member with this Community Preservation Committee member. Okay, but it's not clear.
Yeah, so wouldn't you think it would be implicit if you say that you're gonna add a permanent member of the Open Space Committee be a permanent member? I mean, that could be within the 4 corners of you're actually adding a member.
Not unless you say, and you're going to remove the at-large member. I mean, right now, I'm not looking at the bylaw, but if the bylaw says there is an at-large member and your intent is to replace that at-large member with a member of the Community Preservation Committee, and I just lost my whole screen, so give me a minute.
I understand. Yeah, that this was not the intent, but rather than pushing this off for another 6 months, I'd rather just go ahead and, go and be consistent with the article if that's allowable.
And so de facto, that increases the membership of the committee to 8.
So we'd have to also revise A, so it'd be 8 voting members.
Right. Come on. Oh dear, have I lost the whole meeting?
No, we still hear you.
My screen went away, so I'm struggling here a little bit. Let me just. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. These wonderful computer things. Wendy, I don't think that you can simply move what's written in the warrant article to make a member of the Community Preservation Committee a member of the have a member of the Conservation Commission as a member of the Community Preservation Committee without changing the composition of the committee, because your intent is to replace the at-large committee member with this Conservation Committee member. But it doesn't say that.
Right, so could we revise A to make it 8 voting members? And just
You
not.
you can, but not under this warrant article. Oh, let me think a minute. So Angus, can I see the warrant again instead of the?
Yes.
Okay. So we've got. Okay, so this is a four corners question, Wendy, which I'm considering as I speak.
Okay.
So if the motion were to say to amend the West Newbury Town bylaws by revising section 1 of Article 36, Community Preservation Committee bylaw thereof, as follows, to designate that a permanent member of the Community Preservation Committee be I'm making this up and it's not the best English. You can you consider that, okay? Be an additional member of the West Newbury Open Space Committee. So that it's not a replacement, you're adding one. That's what you're suggesting?
Yeah, that seems the best way to try to get consistency between what's in the article.
How does that justify with didn't the bylaw show 7?
Yeah, so we'd also have to change that to 8.
Well, yeah, but it,
How can we do that if that isn't already on the warrant? I mean, if that's not part of the existing article, how can we add that?
Well, that, I think it would be implicit in that.
So let me understand, what is the need to do this in a timely fashion?
It's just been on the table for 2 years, because the Open Space Committee doesn't get representation on a committee that 30% of the money goes towards, open space and recreation. So it's,
Is there anything that, maybe I'm missing something here, but is there anything that prevents an open space member from being appointed as the member at large? I mean,
No, that's what we're doing now.
Yeah, okay, so.
but it's just not right. I mean,
Yeah, but I mean, it seems to me as though we're twisting ourselves with pretzels, trying to do something that unfortunately, just through a simple oversight, wasn't worded correctly. And I guess I don't see the downside in waiting another 6 months until a special, or approximately 6 months until special town meeting in the fall, and just doing it with this total clarity. I don't see that it's going to actually affect anything, that it's going to actually make a difference to anything. Is that right, or maybe?
Yeah, it's just.
I mean, I understand if you want to get.
There's this need to have things neatly tied up, which I understand. But the fact is, the way the article is written, it does not say that you're going to change the composition of the committee. It says that this Community Preservation Committee is going to be a member, which de facto makes the composition of the committee 8. So if you wanted to make the composition of the committee 8, I would think that would be in the 4 corners of this article, that, so you're going to add a member of the to the Open Space Committee. So instead of having 7 members of the Open Space Committee, now you're going to have 8 members of the Open Space Committee. I see that as within the 4 corners. In terms of replacing an at-large member with a member of the Open Space Committee, I don't see that in the 4 corners, because you're changing the composition of the committee, which is not at all reflected in this article.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
this article sounds like you want to add something to this committee, which is reasonable, but it doesn't say that you want to take anything away.
Right. So does the fact that the markup of the bylaw in the FinCom packet still has 7 and shows the at-large member being struck, is that an issue? This is supplementary information. It's not part of the article.
It's supplementary information, and in terms of something like this, it's actually my call to say whether it's in the 4 corners or not. It's not the FinCom's call. So,
I would like to do that, just to make it formal, if you don't have an objection,
To do,
to just add and have 8 members.
okay, but then I guess,
I would suggest, let's put this on for the pre-meeting Saturday, since we aren't, the board's not formal. No
that's actually a
apologies.
great point.
Yeah, so let's put this on for the pre-meeting Saturday, and the board can either, decide how you want to do it. So,
All right, thanks, Casey. Sorry to
okay.
put you on the spot.
So, are there any other questions about any other articles?
Archie,
Oh, sorry, Archie, I blended in with the,
with the yellow.
yeah. Archie, your hand is up?
I just wanted to, I couldn't quite hear all of what happened at the end there. So, what would be the intent of what we would do before the meeting on Saturday? I wasn't.
So basically, it sounds like there's 2 options on the table, either of which sounds like pass muster with a moderator. One would be to revise the article, basically to say revise the motion. So vote to amend for the purpose of requiring that a permanent member of the Community Preservation Committee be an additional member. Well, we'll have to revise it. Yes.
Okay.
But basically to add an additional member as an open space committee member, which would have the result of changing the composition of the CPC from 7 to 8 while retaining the at-large member. Or the second option would be to pass over the article and bring it back, written.
Oh, okay. I just didn't hear that. Okay.
Yeah, and so then what I had said, Archie, is rather than the board members sharing their opinions tonight, that we could put that on for the pre-town meeting on Saturday morning for the board to decide what direction the majority you want to go.
Can I just clarify have a clarification on one thing? The limitation, the current number specified in the existing bylaw, does it say 7 people?
It does.
It does.
Okay.
Yep.
And is that in any way represented in the article that the number of people comprising the CPC is changing from 7 to 8?
No.
Okay.
But Casey said that was really, if we say additional.
Is there a reason why they want to not?
Yeah, I mean, ideally you want an odd number, but there's always one person that doesn't show up, so, yeah.
And just in terms of.
One thing I'm just going to put out there, because people may be interested, and I know Casey will be interested, is there is the potential that the school committee, which is meeting tonight, would vote revised assessment for Pentucket in light of the override not passing. So if that were to happen and we get a revised number, then a hold would be placed on that section of the budget on Saturday to reduce the assessment for Pentucket. So Casey, I know you're meeting with Jim, I believe, this week. I didn't know what day or time, but
Actually, tomorrow, well, it's tomorrow.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so
And also I have one thing I'd like to say. It's not going to be popular, but I'm going to say it anyway. With respect to the car post, all of you are discussing this as if the 2 options that you've presented and then the vote to rescind the funds is an either or option. And in fact, in terms of town meeting, it's not. Town meeting could reject all of those. And I don't like to people, I was hearing some of this earlier with respect to the wetlands bylaw, that, okay, the town has to do this or the town has to do that, or, whatever. And that is simply not true. And I've fought against that the entire time I've been moderator. It's the town meeting. If they don't like something, whatever it is, they don't have to vote for it. And there was a time in West Newbury where we had a situation where the selectmen used to say, if you don't vote for this, our budget will not be approved and we will not be able to fund our government. You have to vote for what we propose. This was a long, long time ago before any of you were there. So I'm not insulting any of you. And it took me a while to explain to people that that was not the case. That town meeting was their meeting and that they were the voters and they could vote however they felt about any motion that was on the floor. There was no requirement that they vote for or against anything. And in this case, that's the truth. So it's not an either or. You're giving them options. They can choose to accept one of the options, or they can choose to reject both of the options. That's the will of the town. So, I think you need to be careful about presenting it as you have to do one or the other. No, they don't.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't hear anything unpopular, Casey. I think you've got a lot of support with what you said.
And it was completely correct.
Mm.
Sorry if I implied, or if it seemed as though I was implying that the town had to vote one way or another. I guess what I was referring to was that from the standpoint of the select board, we had to do something. We couldn't do nothing.
No, I understand your intent, and I don't think that you were trying to do that. But sometimes the discourse becomes that way, and people hear things you don't think they hear.
Yep, good point. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
And so I suppose going along with your logic, Casey, that they could approve both of the options.
That's right. They
Yeah.
would.
Yeah.
So the question is then, in what order would we do them?
It can get pretty interesting.
Okay. Any other comments? Questions?
We've got,
Is there a hand up? Oh, Chelsea.
Hi, Chelsea McKieran, 387 Middle Street. I just had a quick question about where I could find more information about this in Article 12 for the solar feasibility study. I just was curious where this, the info about the site selected for the study could be found. Sorry, that's a little off what we're talking about, but it was for the 15,000. I think there was 2 against it from FinCom, and you guys were recommending it. I just didn't know if there's info about the site.
Should be in the.
I think there is, and if you bear with me for a second, Rick, let's see, and it's buried. It's not on purpose. It's not on purpose, but it's sometimes we add good information to the website, but not in a place that you would ever think to check.
It's okay. I was digging around, and it's more curiosity than anything.
Yeah. So let me just walk. So we've got this budget information page, which is linked from both the town manager page and the finance committee page. If you click on, and you would never think to do this, so I apologize in advance, but click on FY23 budget information. Then each of the finance committee meeting packets from their 4 meetings are all posted. And so I'm just going to guess and say, was it March 15th? Which was it?
I think it was the last meeting.
Was it the last meeting? Okay, so So let's check if it's there, because the finance committee packets that they get for their meetings kind of have the supporting information for not just the budget, but the articles. And there's a bunch of info in there, so it's not always easy to find what you're looking for, but let me just see if it comes up with.
Yeah, it's right there, it was John's Article 60.
Well, but that was just the draft. That was just the draft warrant. That wasn't. That was just the draft warrant. I think it was there with the. It might have been with the. Let's see. You were definitely at that meeting, Rick, as you know.
Yeah, but there was very limited discussion.
Let's see. But they must have had the information because they had opinions as to whether whether the site selections were the right site selections.
So it must be somewhere in the packet.
I mean, I definitely have. You know what? It might have just been information you presented verbally. It's.
No, I didn't. They had that information.
Okay.
Because I'm pretty confident that I did not.
Yeah,
I might have answered the question.
Yeah, no, I know I had put as backup materials for this article excerpts of the grant that you'd put together, that the committee had put together last fall.
Yeah.
That had, I think, the 5 sites, and it had some base maps. And I had just pulled that out of that grant and dropped it just so people would kind of generally know what was under consideration.
Chelsea, I can explain the sites to you if we can't.
Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And I can always, if there's like I can dig around too, or if there's a link or something. I was just gonna look it up. I was curious as I was looking through everything. It was just.
Yeah, I have something on my server. If we don't find something on the website, we definitely have backup on that. So if you send me an email, it's
sure.
Town manager, all one word, at select board. I'm sorry, town manager at wnewbury.org. And I can send you what I have. But the other thing, Rick, I'm thinking is in the fall, it's going to be in the open session pack. I mean, it's buried, but it's somewhere in there because that was part of the packet that went to the select board at whatever date in the fall that was, which I wouldn't.
So Chelsea, just real quickly, the 5 sites, I'll just say verbally, it's somewhere the information is available in writing in one of these packets, but the 5 sites were, I guess, the first is the one that's closest to us here, and that's the back parking lots behind the 1910 building, the feasibility of installing solar canopies on those lots. And I'm not gonna, I won't get into details as to disadvantages, advantages, that's not the point. So that's one site. The next site would be along the line, the southern boundary of the area controlled by DPW up on Pipe State Hill. And that would, probably be some kind of sort of a linear frame would put panels on it or pedestals. If you may be familiar with a single pedestal solar that's there currently. The next site would be the field that lies to the north of the playground behind Page School. There's a gently sloping, north facing, but gently sloping field past the playground that is, becoming overgrown with, multi-floor roads and stuff like that. But, it's not a maintained field for anything anymore. I don't know if it gets mowed or not. And then the last two sites would be what are referred to as the north field and the south field on the Dunn property. So not the main field on the Dunn property, but the smaller fields that are to the north and the south.
Thank you. That's really helpful. That's awesome.
Oh, and yeah, if you do want, we have something that's got maps and things. So if you do send an email, I'm happy to send you what we've got, and we could easily post that to the website as well.
That's great. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Sure.
That's all.
Yeah, I mean, just while I've got the board here and some number of residents, what Jim and I have talked about and kind of the vision is to, start to have a town meeting like landing page where we would post by article all the backup, because as you know, because you get it in your packets, there's a lot of backup for a lot of these articles, and that would be really great. And it's just been not having that, position staffed. So, but those are the kinds of things that with the, full-time assistant town clerk, we really want to make it easier to find things on the site. So that's a work in progress.
Okay.
And Elisa actually had a really good suggestion just the other day of if prior to posting the packets, if we did an OCR, and although actually a lot of it is searchable anyway, because I convert directly from PDF rather than scanning. So a lot of that's already going to be searchable, but if you did an OCR on the whole thing, the whole packet would be searchable.
Yeah.
And it's a little cumbersome, but then a web search, someone could find anywhere the word solar appears in any of the packets. And that would, again, it'd be trial and error, but it would eventually get you what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So would that require additional software?
No, our software can do it. Yep.
Great. Right.
Wrap this up?
We're wrapped.
It's not 11:30 yet.
Yeah, you can get a couple more hours. Right. You're too smart for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Polly.
Thanks, Paul. See you later.
All right, I think that's going to do it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.